Hello, hello. I'm Strider, your host here at Author in the Headlights, and I want to thank you for joining us. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and you won't miss a single one of our episodes. Today we've got a returnee. Woohoo! Hello, Lynn. How are you?
I'm good, Strider. How are you?
I'm doing great. Always do great. And
Oh, we
now
both live in the Pacific Northwest,
we
so
do.
can't
We
beat
do.
that.
And it's been snowy and rainy and sunshine and fog and hail and well, it's winter in the Northwest.
Yeah.
Let's see. Lynn Bohart. I think I missed that part of it. We want to make sure we get that so people know how to find you. Now, we've had you on before. You've got, oh gosh, you've got a pile of books. The Old Maids of Mercer Island Mysteries. I love that. And you've got Detective Giorgio Salvatore
Salvatore,
Mysteries.
right.
Yeah, you've got some of those. And it's a different one. Your unconventional marketing
Marketing
ideas
techniques.
for
Yeah.
self-published authors. That's something, hey, if you're an author, you can go there and check that one out from Lynn. And you've read other paranormal mystery novels. You've got some singles out there and bits
hmm
and pieces, and that's just a lot of writing.
I do a lot of writing. I'm a
Oh,
freelance writer now that I've retired from my full-time career, so I pretty much write every day, one way or the other.
yeah, I just write them off. That's
Yeah.
I do need to sit down and do more writing of my own. I mean, I am an author, but I end up doing so many other things on the side, such as author in the headlights, that it
hmm
does take time for my writing. So, got to get back to that too. And you have set up some time to do that. And in fact, you have just recently, I mean, like brand new recently, come out with a new book.
I have.
And it's a new series kind of
It's a
thing.
new
Is it a
series.
series or a single?
It's a new age group. It's a young adult novel, which I have never done before. Kind of a spin-off, based on the lead character from my Old Maids of Mercer Islands, called The Unstoppables: Case of the Missing Will.
The
I
Unstoppables.
was a big Nancy Drew reader when I was a kid, and it was always, case of the missing clock or case of the whatever. So I'm kind of doing a
Yeah.
spin-off on that.
Yeah, I did Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and
Mhm.
that was fun stuff. So this is kind of set off of your Old Maids of Mercer Island series, but is it a precursor to those or just separate?
It is a precursor in that it's Julia Applegate in the Old Maids book. She's the protagonist. And this is Julia Brower. So this is Julia at 13. So obviously it's her maiden name
Uh-huh.
in Wisconsin, where she grew up. So the Old Maids of Mercer Island books obviously take place here in the Northwest. These take place in a small town in Wisconsin. And so it's really following Julia and her brother Ben. She has a genius level brother who's 3 years older than she is. He shows up in the fifth book of the Old Maids series, and then is in the sixth book, and he will probably be in all of those books going forward. And I just thought it would be really fun to explore what they were like as kids, how their relationships have changed, and solving mysteries. So that's what this is. It's the two of them and their family and the kids' friends. If you think of Home Alone, that old movie, it's a little
Yep.
bit of that. It's a little bit of the kids of Stranger Things, um, and it's great fun.
Now this is set in what, I don't remember, 1965, is that right?
1965. So it's when
Hmm.
Julia's 13 and Ben is 16.
Yeah, and I was about, well, I won't say.
Well, I was in
I
high
was
school at
there.
the time.
Yeah,
I was in high school at the time, this was a walk down memory lane for me.
I'll bet.
And you can imagine writing in that time period is very different. I mean, this is before cell phones, the internet, social media, any of that. So that was
She can
part of
go,
the
hey,
challenge.
Google. No, you had to go
Yeah,
look it
no
up
Google.
somewhere.
Right. Yeah, we would have gone to an encyclopedia. I remember them selling Encyclopedia Britannicas.
Hmm.
I remember the salesman coming door to door. That was a big deal. If you bought a full set of encyclopedias, not every family had those,
No.
because in the Old Maids of Mercer Island books, when I first started that series, it's a group of four older women
Hmm.
on who live in Mercer on Mercer Island, and they're all widowed or divorced, and but they have resources available to them. They have money, they have cars. Julia owns a big bed and breakfast on the island. They have friends. Their exes. I mean, Julia's ex is the governor of Washington State. So they have resources available to them that obviously kids don't have.
And a history of people to connect with, just plain old
Exactly.
information and how to
Exactly.
and who to go to. And you're right, teenagers don't. It's all what you can come up with.
When I started the Old Maids book, I mean, obviously I've never killed anybody. Just want to get that out there. Um, so, I remember when I first started writing mysteries, I had to think through, so how would I approach this?
Hmm.
If I were going to solve a mystery, and what kind of resources in my community would I try to tap into, to get the information I need to solve a mystery? And again, those women have money and resources, and as you said, connections that they can tap into. The kids don't have that. So that was one of the challenges in writing this. When I finally sat down to do it, it was like, okay, so how do a group of teenagers solve what police officers sometimes can't solve? I wanted them to understand that it was a bit different. We didn't have backpacks then. I
We
carried my
carried our
book to
books. Yep.
school. That's right. Little things like that. Transistor radios had just come out, and there is a transistor
Yep.
radio in this. I had to do some research to kind of figure what was some of the language, you know, and in modes of transportation. They ride their bikes everywhere because
Everywhere.
yeah. So that was kind of the fun part of it, was tapping into a different culture back then. And a lot of people say they want to go back in time because it was a simpler time. And yet those kinds of things like racism, domestic violence, murder, all of that still existed,
It did.
and people had to deal with it in their own way.
Yeah. Well, I can see why I end up writing action adventure rather than mystery for young adult because I do know how to went out and did things.
Mhm.
And so I can put that effect into, say, 100 years ago. Well, this is what would have done. This is what it took because I've done those things. I haven't
Yeah,
gone out and solved many mysteries, but I have
right.
done a lot of things. So there is a little bit difference in how you put that together. I do have a question on that with your writing, since you do mysteries and you've written so many books. As a writer, then what method do you use to write? Do you have everything all laid out, or is a lot of it just off the cuff? Is it,
So I don't use an outline, but I have the concept sort of laid out in my brain. And usually what happens with me as I'm writing, those things change a bit as I'm, getting to the end of the book. I have often changed I shouldn't say often, but at least twice, I've changed the villain at the end because I decided a character that I had developed along the road to the end of the book was actually a better villain. And so I
uh-huh.
switched, and he was close enough to the crime to be even more reasonable as the villain. So to me, it's more creative that way. I sat in on one of those sessions with John Grisham, and he plots his books. Well, he plots them to the nth degree. He answers all the questions. He takes weeks and weeks and weeks to plot his books. If I did that, I wouldn't write them. I don't know about you, but for me, it would take the creativity out of it for me.
I don't know which would be longer. I really don't. I happen to do see the pants writing myself, and once you get going, it flows and creates its own story. It really, really does. For people
Hmm.
that haven't done that, I can't even really explain it because it actually writes itself and you're just sitting there
Hmm.
trying to keep up on the keyboard. When you get stuck though, and you don't have a, where am I going from here? How did I get here? What am I going to do with it? It takes a while to figure out what you're going to do.
Hmm.
I can see the benefits of outlining ahead of time,
Hmm.
but that's not the way I do it.
So I know the mystery portion of the book. I know where I'm going. I know typically who I want the villain to be and why and how I'm going to catch him. Well, I know what the ending is.
So
And
you
then
just
I
have to
kind of
fill in the middle.
and then I fill in between. And again, as I said, it doesn't mean I won't change things
Mhm.
along the way, but at least I have a definition or a destination. If I didn't have the destination, and then I think I'd get lost.
That is
So
a
I think
critical difference there.
it is.
Just sitting down to write something, or you've got a pretty good
Hmm.
plot idea, concept, and this is where I want to go. Because your character arc, there has to be
Right,
a character
right,
arc. It has to go from here to here.
right.
And that person has to start at this and end up at this. And when you know those things, the inside filling of that isn't too hard to
Yeah.
come up with. But if you don't know that, you're just going off the cuff. It's
Well, and with this one, because they're teenagers, the reason I created this book was in the fifth book of the old Maid series, the posters behind me up there, The
mhm.
Key to Murder. One of Julia's oldest and dearest friends ends up on her doorstep and dies right in front of her. His name is Carter, and she's known him since she was a kid. In the next book, her brother has moved into Carter's house. He and Carter were best friends, and he brings a box to Julia saying, "Here's some of Carter's notes. He was writing a short story called Case of the Missing Will." And he jokes with Julia that that's the case that they had all worked on and she ought to finish the story. So when I did that in that last book, No Place Like Home for a Murder, I thought, okay, why don't you write it, Lynn? So that's what I did. That's why I started writing this book. And so even though I have this adult version of Julia, she's fearless. She has to right every wrong. She can't let the bad guy win kind of thing. She's just compelled to get in there and fight for the underdog. So I was able to, I hope, be able to create that in a younger version of her that even though she doesn't have as much power, she's not independent, an independent adult, she doesn't have money, but she has resolve, even as a 13-year-old, and so does her brother. And so, together they bring the unstoppables.
Well, it sounds fun. It really does. When you already have what they're going to turn out to be, and you kind of go back to that. I really, really like it.
As teenager Strider, we don't have, or we didn't have, um, we may have had resolve, but I was always worried about what other kids would think, you know, um, am I going to get punished for this? What's the punishment going to
There
be?
is some of that. We also have
Yeah.
determination. Determination, you may not know how you're going to do it, but you know kind of why, because it needs to, or I want to, or it's going to happen, whatever I can do to get there. Teenagers have determination.
Yeah.
So this is connected to the other one. It's a brand new set, The Unstoppables.
No, well, yes. I mean,
Net
that's sort of the
parted.
overarching. They would find the book under Case of the Missing Will.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's a fun ride. I call it a teen mystery adventure because I keep sort of likening it back to Stranger Things. If you watch that, where those kids, took on alien beasts, it had a lot of humor in it, tension,
Sure.
adventure, and yet these were teenagers that were accomplishing all of that. And so that's a lot of what this book is about.
Excellent. And not only do you write, you also are an editor.
I'm doing a lot of book coaching right now, which I love. I used to teach. I taught for 10 years,
Hmm.
creative writing and crafting the story. And so I'm not doing that anymore, I'm because I'm I do it most everything virtually. And so I kind of switched over to book coaching because I liked working with my students so much. So now I'm working with, people that are writing. I'm working with somebody who's writing an historical romance, and somebody else who's writing a mystery. And it's just really fun to work with budding writers who just need a little help along the way. Because sometimes, and this, Strider, we get so close to the manuscript and the story that sometimes we can't see the big picture. It's hard
Sure.
for us to step back because we've been so invested in the just the little details. And so sometimes you need somebody from the outside to come in brand new and say, "Hey, did you think of this?" Or "What about moving this around?" or whatever. And so that's what I try to do.
Yeah. So how can people get hold of you if they want to do that?
They can just go to my website. It's www.lynnbohart-author.com. And check it out. I also do a newsletter called Let's Talk About Murder that they can sign up for free. I interview, I interviewed Marcia Clark, who was the O.J. Simpson prosecutor. I interview other authors. I interview retired detectives and forensic criminologists in that.
Mystery writers.
Yeah, it's just really it's been fascinating for me. I just recently interviewed a canine handler who he goes out and searches for clandestine graves with the dogs, which is just fascinating to me. And upcoming will be a tracker. He's out there tracking, trying to find where killers may have buried the
Yeah.
body. So they can sign up for that free, and they can see all my books on the website.
All right. Lynn Bohart, writer of mystery.
Yes, and Strider, thank you. I mean, I just appreciate so much that what you do, and I'm sure your listeners do too. It's a
Well,
great way to learn more about what's going on in the writing community.
it is, and every tip we can get can improve our writing skills for those who are writers. And for you readers, hey, there's a new book right there that you know you're going to want to read. All right. So your books will be listed on our website there. You can link to those below. And those the rest of you that are out there, thank you so much for listening to us today. And until next time. Sponsored by DurhamandPublishing.com.